Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kutan.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Now, the upcoming Melaka elections will see 112 individuals contest for the 28 seats in the State Assembly. This compared with the last general elections that saw only 85 individuals contesting the 28 seats. Now, many of the constituencies will see 3, 4, 5, and up to 6 cornered fights. So what does this reveal about our evolving political dynamics? Let's speak now to Associate Professor Dr. Umu Atiyah Ahmad Zakwan. She's a political analyst from University Utara Malaysia. Dr. Umu, looking at nomination day today at the Melaka elections, I mean, was it expected that these state polls would have attracted such an unusually high number of candidates? I mean, looking at all 28 state seats that would be contested, all three major coalitions will be contesting those 28 seats. And then there's also the inclusion of, surprise independents and some fringe political parties. Did that come as a surprise to you?
Yeah. Hi, Melissa. Hi, Sharad. Actually, I was also surprised, when the election commission released, the formal announcement that we witnessed 22 independent candidates, and it was claimed, it was announced as the highest in the history so far. I think because of this, I can say that because of the timeline of this state election, political parties, they wanted to test. I think this is as a test ground for them before coming to the GE15. So that's why we can see that BN, for instance, wanted to go solo. I mean, apart from or detached from Perikatan Nasional, and you also can see that independent candidates also coming in, and then we can see new aspiring political party also are in, like what we see Putra, and then we can see Iman are in the league as well. I also think that what attracted there are so many contests, from political parties, is because they wanted to see how far actually voters accepted their parties. So this is actually a ground of testing, and then this is the right time before coming to the next general election.
So Uma, following up on that question, should Muda, which was kind of in the headlines for a while because we expected them to be fielded along with the Pakatan Harapan slate, they, for whatever reasons that they've stated, have pulled out. Should they have, as you suggest, other parties are doing, test the ground themselves? Should they have participated in the Melaka state elections?
Oh, okay. For Muda, I have a slightly different stand on Muda, because I think since Muda is the only party that represents the youth, I don't think that Muda should associate with other parties, because Muda has not registered yet, and then due to that, Muda has to join any coalition. So previously, we can see that Muda had maybe some arrangement, discussion or negotiation with Pakatan Harapan, but eventually, I think it didn't work, and then Muda decided not to contest. I think it is good Muda not to contest, because I really want to see Muda as an individual party to really test its ground. But because of the structural constraint, it's not being registered yet. Then I think Muda can take this, this time available to prepare for the next GE15. Because if Muda join any coalition, I fear that it can be shadowed by other coalitions, interests, or we can say principle, or or manifesto. There will be negotiation among of course the coalition within that. But if Muda stand alone, I think will project more, the strength, the uniqueness of that political party. And then considering also Undi 18 will be mainstream, will be in full force in the next general election. So Muda will be ready by that time.
Right. And can I ask you, Sorry, Sharad, you had a question. Go for it.
No, just to follow up then, I mean, very quickly, is the main contest really between Perikatan Nasional, Barisan Nasional, and Pakatan Harapan? Should any observer from the rest of the country ignore all the outliers and all these small parties? I mean, are they just there for color?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So basically, yes, we can see that the heavyweights, are among these three major coalition, like what you mentioned just now, right? But then, to be fair, I think we need to celebrate other parties as well, because in one perspective we can see that this is a thriving democracy, right? So when our democracy is thriving, so it is a great platform for everybody to express, through their political party, their struggle, their aspiration, their ideas, their mission, for instance. So it's good, to show that, you have the platform. You can create your own party, like what we saw in the post GE 14. We see Muda, we see Pejuang, we see recently Putra, right? But at the same time, politics is about winning the game. So in this regard, we can see that the heavyweights are actually between those three coalition that you mentioned. So there is a various perspective if you want to put to see it. But in general, I think it's good for other party, what you say, outliers, to come and showcase their parties. This is a good introductory period, for their party for general election, the coming general election. It's good for their visibility. Yeah.
I take your point that this, the Melaka polls is essentially a litmus test for the next general elections. And I'm particularly interested to see the way these three major coalitions have positioned themselves in the Melaka polls. Can we take a look at Perikatan Nasional specifically and, Bersatu in terms of working with PAS and PAS choosing Bersatu or choosing Perikatan Nasional over UMNO? How do you think that might play out, particularly as PN goes head-to-head with BN and PH?
Yeah. Well, I think this is actually very critical to all coalition. And then I think I can see that we are experiencing and exploring a new way of doing politics. Now we can see that coalition is very flexible. It can take place after or post-election, right? So what I'm seeing is BN, for instance, in this regard is in Melaka. I think BN it has the feeling that they are very strong in Melaka, and they really wanted to show that they can come back, to this state, and then they wanted to see how far that they can go in the next general election. And I'm seeing the coalition might be changed. It could be it might be no longer between PAS and Bersatu. It could be, between UMNO and come back with maybe an extra party that win in this election. So what I'm saying is that yes.
Right. So if I can interrupt you, I was wondering if this issue around UMNO and PAS and Bersatu really is about establishing hegemony over Malay politics, and that this contest is necessary between UMNO and Bersatu in particular because of their presumed leadership of the Malay community politically, and so that whoever wins this gets to call themselves the leader of Malay political society. Is that what we're seeing, a contest for hegemony within Malay politics?
Yeah, that's a very great perspective that you have. I think it's very true in the context of Melaka, because Melaka, if you see, is UMNO influence is very strong, still very strong in Melaka, even though we see that in the previous election, GE14, although we can see the number of seats won by BN were reduced significantly, but still they managed to have a good control, of the Malay seats, and then and we know that in Malaysia, especially in Johor and Melaka, are known to be a very strong supporters from the Malay community. And then if we look around, still I think among the older voters, I think they still believe that UMNO, especially in the rural area, UMNO is still a good party for them. But if you look into a more urban area, if you even talk about Malay community in the urban area, so we can see that they're a bit open. I mean, they don't really confine to UMNO anymore. That's where you can see the choice that they made in the previous election. But coming to your question again, I think UMNO is still relevant, whether you like it or not, or people who audience who listen to us right now. UMNO, however, whatever image that we perceive, or we saw that what people say about UMNO still relevant among the Malay community. Yeah.
Right. Well, Umu, thank you so much for joining us on the show today and sharing your insights, particularly after what has been quite a surprising nomination day for Melaka elections, kicking off the 12-day campaign period until polling day on the 20th. Thank you for your time. Political analyst Dr. Umu Atiyah Ahmad Zakwan there from UUM. We're going to take a quick break, but we will be back with more political analysis on the Melaka polls. Stay tuned to consider this.
Kes masih amanah di tangan kita. Adat, budaya dan semangat menjadi kesinambungan perpaduan tanah air yang tercinta. Berteraskan adab yang terpahat di jiwa dan raga. Marilah bersama kita membina negara Malaysia.
Untuk memastikan Malaysia ada ke depan dan maju.
Induknya adalah Melayu.
Balik kepada Islam. Orang yang membuat polisi.
Kalau itu yang dikehendaki, fine. Mungkin kita berbeza pandangan.
Tapi kita mempunyai kuasa yang boleh menentukan budaya di masa hadapan.
Polisi yang mesra wanita sudah tentu dia akan datang daripada pemimpin wanita.
Asrama Mahat Tahfiz Jabal.
Bila sentuh soal berita, tiada masa untuk tunggu. Kepada anda kami bawakan fakta, susulan dan kupasan yang terkini. Tiada drama dan tiada pengulangan. Usah tunggu lama-lama. AWANI 7.45 lebih awal dari biasa.
Hi, thanks so much for staying with Shrad and I on Consider This. Nominations closed today for the Melaka state elections with a total of 112 candidates in 28 seats from Barisan Nasional, Perikatan Nasional and Pakatan Harapan, as well as some fringe political parties and independents. Now, joining us on the show, we have Executive Director of Merdeka Center, Ibrahim Sufian, or more familiarly known as Ben. Ben, looking at the lineup that was revealed today for the for candidacy for the Melaka polls, was there anything surprising that was revealed today, or was that kind of anticipated, given how much coverage has been had over the political maneuverings between coalitions?
Well, there's some mild surprise on my part. I mean, first of all, thank you for having me on. I like being on this thing. So I think my main surprise is how many new faces were fielded by parties like Perikatan as well as Barisan Nasional. Because, for many of these parties, especially Barisan Nasional, it's a party that's been around for ages. And we do know that the party has many leaders on offer within their ranks. We also know that there's a lot of jockeying for position among some of them. But the fact that they have tried to make efforts to field new faces, and particularly younger people as well, at least what's being apparent on social media. I haven't done a full-scale analysis, but more younger candidates, I think that's very good. But I think what I'm disappointed is the number of women candidates that are being fielded right now by the major parties, only around 10%. That is far short in terms of what's needed. And I think that presents a major handicap for the parties that are going to contest in this election, particularly those that are going to go full-on three-corner in the marginal seats in the state.
But Ben, as you point out, the interesting foregrounding of a young candidates is very interesting, especially because this election will exclude that 18 to 20-year-old cohort that in many, according to some analysts, have been essentially disenfranchised by this move to have a state election. So why was it? What's the imperative for political parties to field younger people when in fact there is no kind of surge in younger voters?
Well, I think in part the parties themselves are trying to, to show that they do have concern about the sentiments of young voters. They want to make the symbolic connection with young voters out there. And so we do have a 21-year-old candidate, 25, 27-year-old candidate being fielded for the first time. I think the youngest is from PKR. And a few other young candidates, although this election will not see 18, 19, 20-year-olds voting. But I think the parties want to signal that they are making steps towards making themselves more appealing to younger people, showing that they have leaders that can connect with younger people in the country. So I think a lot of the parties, leaders especially, are looking at this election with an eye towards the next general election, in part because Melaka has an interesting demographic that's roughly similar to that of West Malaysia. And number two, it is, I would say, the first test before we have general elections here in Peninsular Malaysia. And the parties are all trying to test the different formula and also leadership, lineup ahead of potentially future general elections.
Okay. Well, Ben, much ado has been made in the headlines about this being, the many multi-cornered fights, 3, 4, 5, 6 cornered fights for this general elections. And we know because there are all three major coalitions are going head to head, and the inclusion of, the other smaller parties as well as independents make it a very busy race. What does that signal to you? I mean, if you say that this is, a precursor to how the dynamics might work out for the next general elections, what do these multi-cornered fights signal to you? Is this something we might be expecting going forward, that we will see many, many people contest a constituency?
Well, I think the multi-party contest that we are seeing right now is, I think, symptomatic of the political situation that we are confronted with. I think we are seeing the fragmentation of the dominant party. UMNO itself has been splintering over the years, and we see more splinters coming out from UMNO. And out of this, I think, a lot of the leadership as well as individuals, possibly see that this is a situation where they can try for themselves. I think a lot of people are seeing that the dominant party is no longer dominant. They are weaker now. The electorate is going to be expanded. There's more room for competition. There's more chance for new parties and new leadership to try their luck, to some extent, or offer themselves for leadership. But I think if we look at the core of the contestants in this election, the three principal coalitions, Barisan, Perikatan, as well as Pakatan, these three, I think, represent, what we probably will see the main contestants in the next election. What's also interesting is that the meaning or the potential outcome out of all this, we do know that Perikatan and Barisan Nasional, almost entirely will depend on the majority Malay electorate for their support. But if they can cooperate with one another, that means the likelihood of whoever that's going to form a government in Melaka or federally, when the country's federal elections take place, these are all up in the air. So I think it's anybody's guess. But the indications are there.
Ben, it's probably too early to ask you to, place your bets on who's going to win, and whether, some of these major contests might see Bersatu meet its Waterloo, as it were. But I do want to kind of shift the conversation away from what sort of raging on, on social media, which is all about the strategies and decisions that politicians make, and politicians and their operatives, explaining themselves, as it were, their decisions, to how the ground is reading it, how voters are reading it. Do voters care that Pakatan Harapan has included two former UMNO aduns in their lineup? Do voters care that Muda wasn't given a place? Do voters care that the talk of Malay-Muslim unity is completely rent asunder by, the decisions that PAS made to kind of, as it were, put aside the Muafakat Nasional and side with Bersatu? What is the ground like?
Well, I think first and foremost, people are quite upset. When we spoke to people, over the past 1 week, we find that people in Melaka are upset with this particular election, because for many of them, their lives have been affected negatively by the pandemic, economically affected by the pandemic. As you know, Melaka is a small state and very dependent on the tourist industry for the retail and service sector there. So a lot of people are upset because they are concerned that this election can create another super spreader event, and then case numbers are going to be high again, and then, we have lockdown. So I think people are very concerned about that. And so there's a degree of unhappiness over how the politics have, come undone, and that polls have had to be done right now, right at the point in time when, the cases in terms of infection is declining. So people are scared about that. Number two, the situation right now with political parties bickering and resulting in the dissolution of the state assembly also, I think, has given the impression on the ordinary members of the public that the politicians only care about power and not about the livelihoods and the issues faced by the ordinary public. So that, I think, is the major sentiment that we've detected right now. But beyond that, if you look into the specific issues, whether, specific parties like Muda has been included, and the inclusion of people who have jumped from one side of the aisle to the other, this, I think, will be evident in the campaign itself. We find that, I think, in places where, for example, Idris Harun is going to contest, certain segments of the voters there may not be quite happy. They may not show up to vote in as large numbers as what we expect to see. But overall, we find that people probably will participate in this election, but perhaps at a lower rate as compared to the general election. In the last general election, more than 80%, if I'm not wrong, it's about 86%, 85% voter turnout. We expect the turnout to be more subdued this time on account of several factors. Number one, the concern over COVID. Number two, large numbers of Malakans, perhaps numbering about 10 to 15% of the ethnic Chinese, are not in the state. They are probably working somewhere else in Johor or Singapore, so they may not come back to vote in large numbers. But likewise, other young voters may not show up in as large numbers as well because they feel disenfranchised, and ultimately the main characters in this election are still the pre-existing warlords and political players.
All right. Ben, so having said that, over the next 12 days, now that nomination is over, we've kicked off the campaign period, what are you watching out for, or what are you expecting in the lead up to the polls, particularly since the Election Commission has come out with their own set of SOPs for this particular election?
Yeah, I had a look at the SOPs, and I find that it is extremely tight, and it basically renders the political campaign that we're traditionally used to into nothingness. Basically, all campaigns will have to be either virtual or on social media platforms or on the traditional either cable TV or print media, which I think will disadvantage some of the parties in the opposition. But having said that, this will make it exceedingly hard to persuade voters to come out to vote, number one. Number two, to vote in a certain way, because I think for many people who are used to elections here in Malaysia, it is an event. There's an air of festivity about it because people do go out, they attend ceramah, and they mingle and talk to friends, and there is a sense of being able to mobilize people, particularly around certain issues. So now I think the challenge is to find means of conveying that message, persuading people to show up through social media platforms, which I think is going to be difficult, not impossible. It depends on, I think it's a contest on creativity as well as cash, because then you need to advertise online and try to get the eyeballs and mobilize them to walk over to the polling station. So I think that is going to be the case. The other thing is, we have three parties. Pakatan Harapan, does have their base there. There might be some dissension there, but I think by and large, most of them are still going to vote in a certain way. The main concern there is turnout. I think what's going to be interesting to watch in this election is the battle between Perikatan Nasional and Barisan Nasional, because they are both going to vie for the 60% Malay electorate there. And I think if you break down the numbers in Melaka into the components, you have about 61% Malay voters. I would reckon about 20% of them are going to vote for Pakatan Harapan pretty much the same way they did in 2018, although at a slightly lesser number. And so Barisan Nasional and Perikatan are going to battle it out over just about one half of the electorate, and given the nature of the seat composition there in Selangor, in Melaka, you're going to have a very tight contest, and whoever wins the state, if any, will win with a very narrow margin of perhaps one or two seats. It is also likely that the election may result in no strong majority.
Okay. Ben, excellent points made, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Ibrahim Sufian of Merdeka Centre there, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching, and good night.